Welcome back to this 3 Drives Historic Special. Our next action-packed item takes us to Donington Park for a relatively new event in their race calendar. This is the Donington Historic Festival. It only started in 2011, but it's already a world-class event and a glittering display of how motorsport used to be. Standing in a pit lane with these amazing long-distance runners, you could believe that you've actually travelled back to the late 1960s. The glory days of the 1,000-kilometre endurance races in Le Mans and Daytona. This is one of several historic races held at the festival, and the 1,000-kilometre category showcases a formula that originally ran from 1968 until the end of 1971, when cars over 3 litres were eventually banned. In 1970, Porsche and Ferrari were the big players in this category, with strong challenges from Lola, Chevron and Ford. A busy pit lane would have looked just like this, with heat haze rising slowly from monsters such as this 5.7-litre Lola and this 1967 Porsche 910. Standing here, you're overwhelmed as the smell of rich petrol fills your senses and the deep vibration of the massive engines tingles the very pit of your stomach. You don't just watch a classic race event like this, you actually feel it. This is real race action, with real heroes behind the wheel, and there's no shortage of drama here. A year ago, Frank Seitner, seen here in number 22, crashed his Lola during the same race after suffering a heart attack. Thanks to the rapid response of Donington marshals and on-site medical teams, he made a full recovery, and he's back on the grid with a vengeance. That's cojones of steel, my friends. An oil spill this year led to a spectacular crash that destroyed 2 beautiful E-Type Jags, and you can see the force that Michael Quinn must have felt as his car hit the pit wall. No modern safety measures here. Nevertheless, he says he'll be back next year, which tells you everything you need to know about historic races. But one man making a guest appearance at this event knows all about pushing things to the limits in historic vehicles. Sir Stirling Moss is widely regarded as the greatest racing driver in the history of motorsport, and I was lucky enough to catch up with him for a quick chat.
The thing that's really staggering is the value of those cars. I mean, when they were new in racing, they were relatively cheap. You know, I mean, I for instance, a Formula 1 car of my era cost £3,000 to £5,000. And of course now you're talking about cars of that era that I was racing worth in the millions. So it's a complete change. It's quite extraordinary, really. You know, a modern Formula 1 car is very functional. It's a fantastic thing what it'll do, but you can't. It's not a beauty, you know. When you look at some of the cars here, the older eras of the 50s and 60s, they are really very lovely machines. The biggest problem was they were not so reliable because obviously the metals weren't that good. So wheels would come off and, you know, a lot of nasty things. But the handling and the beauty of the cars and the driving of them, it was so much. You put a car on when you're racing, you know, it becomes part of your body. It's just a fantastic thing to do.
But it's not just the cars that have changed, and away from the track, the golden age of motorsport saw adrenaline-pumping races, like the legendary Mille Miglia, that Stirling won against all odds in 1955, even after colliding with a lorry load of explosives during a practice run.
Mille Miglia could never happen again, first of all only in Italy, but we started at Brescia, which is up north, not too far from Milan, went across the Adriatic, down just to opposite Rome, over the mountains into Rome, and then back up through Florence and so on, and back to Brescia. And that was approximately 1,000 miles. And of course, the roads weren't properly closed because obviously people had to get around, and you've got refrigerated trucks and so on. but all the Italians knew it was on, and therefore they basically kept out of the way, or as much as they could. And so, going on that with over 600 entrants, I mean, you've got all these, Italian hairdressers with the go faster tape down their lances and so on, say, come on, let's have a go. And it was, something that only could happen there. Wonderful.
Listening to Sir Stirling's daring exploits makes you realise how much we miss in the modern world, and I could have sat listening to his tales for hours. But then I'd be letting you down a little, because there's so much more still to show you. Yes, after a period of relative uncertainty, Donington Park is well and truly back in business. What's more, it's hoped that events like the Historic Festival will play a good part in securing a very sound future for the circuit. Donington has teamed up with Historic Promotions Limited in a bid to create an annual event that will showcase the very best elements of historic racing. 10 races held over 2 days cover a huge spread of racing cars, from the 1930s to the 1980s, and according to the organisers, the event aims to encapsulate the most evocative, exciting aspects of motor racing history. That is something that they certainly appear to have achieved, because everywhere you turn, there's something exciting to see. Even away from the field, there's plenty of off-track action with classic karting and a race paddock that's crammed with displays. Here, cars from the 30s to the 80s sit side by side, gleaming in the strong spring sun. And there's something here for almost everyone. The Mad Jack races are an astounding spectacle and are so named because you really do have to have nerves of steel to put these pre-war races around the circuit flat out. In short, you have to be as mad as a hatter. This race is organised by motor racing legends and features 8-litre Bentleys, Type 35 Bugattis and Alpha 8C Monzas, to name but a few. It's a real joy to watch, and the eccentric elbows everywhere drivers can be seen fighting with the huge pre-war steering wheels as they push these museum pieces around bends flat out in hairy four-wheel slides. Then there's the under 2-litre touring cars. These were the everyday track stars before 1966, and you can see why. Legends such as the Lotus Cortina and the Mini Cooper take centre stage once more, as drivers pit their wits against each other flat out and sideways. These aren't static exhibits, this is full-on, high-octane racing that sees these cars pushed to the very limits as they would have been years ago. This is the sort of touring car that Paddy Hopkirk would have been seen pitting back in the day. It's a scene from the very start of modern TC racing, played out with a passion by enthusiasts, many of whom hadn't even been born when spectacles like this were originally seen. By 1965, challenges like this had officially been organised into the European Touring Car Championships that we still see today. Back then, the field was dominated by Alphas, Volvos, BMWs and Minis, but no car was more prominent than the Lotus Cortina. With its obvious green racing stripe, Cortinas like this one, driven by Gabriel Kramer, blazed a trail in early touring car races. These Cortinas were race-tuned by Lotus and adapted for the circuit from Ford's popular 60s production car. This belt and braces racing is described by the organisers here as history on tour. In all, there are over 300 world-class cars at this event, from some of the rarest segments of motor heritage. For example, Formula Junior, which was the precursor to Formula 3, ran for just 6 years as an international category. There is something for practically everyone here, and the JD Classic Challenge features the largest selection of 1972 to 1985 classic cars in one race. Cars like this BMW 3-litre CSL Batmobile versus Capris and classic Corvettes. A double header within the Donington Historic Festival was the first UK race for another famous category. This outing for the historic Formula 2 sees a packed field of almost 30 cars fighting it out for supremacy. The challenge is open to any car built to Formula 2 period regulations between 1967 and 1978, and 3D's been told that the race series, hosted at classic venues around Europe, has become a real success story. The pre-63 GT cars are beautiful to watch, featuring classics like the Aston Martin DB4, the Ferrari 250 and the Porsche 356. The Group C cars are also an amazing spectacle and hold a special place in the heart of anyone who grew up in the 80s. These cars dominated the racing scene for a decade between 1982 and the start of the 90s, by which time the scale of manufacturer spending had risen to the point where independent teams could no longer compete. This finally led to Group C's demise, but not before inspiring an entire generation. We'd love to show you more amazing motorsport history in 3D, but unfortunately that's all we have time for in this section. The festival does, however, run annually at the end of April and is definitely well worth a visit. You can find more details from the official website, which is on screen now. And so we come full circle, back to where we came in with the awe-inspiring 1,000-kilometre racing cars. So I'm going to leave you with one of the most striking scenes from the event, the sights and sounds of the great Le Mans era.